Hello, world, and welcome to the In My Footsteps podcast. I am Christopher Setterland, coming to you from the vacation destination known as Cape Cod, Massachusetts, and this is episode 207. We are plowing our way through the last weeks of summer, but I've got your weekly dose of Gen X nostalgia to help you make the most of these remaining warm summer days. We're going to kick it off with a quote-unquote exciting educational short film going back to the early days of recycling in the 1970s. We're going to go way, way back in the day for a segment I've been waiting to do for a long time as I do an in-depth review of the short-lived TV series Lancelot Link, Secret Chimp. On this week's Top 5, we're going to look back at the worst movies ever that were actually nominated for an Academy Award. And there'll be a brand new This Week in History and Time Capsule looking back at the famed Major League Baseball Players' Strike of 1994. All of that is coming up right now on episode 207 of the In My Footsteps podcast. So what are we going to talk about this week? About how it is the unofficial countdown to the unofficial end of summer. Labor Day is on the horizon, so summer will be over soon for people going back to school. Not for the rest of us, though. There's still 5 more weeks of summer from when this podcast goes live. Enjoy every moment of it. Take this podcast with you to sit on the beach as they get more and more empty, which is the way we like them. First off, thank you all for tuning in to the 207th episode of the podcast. My little oasis of nostalgia that I bring to you on a weekly basis, or almost weekly basis. As always, there's a lot of fun stuff to go on this week, specifically the Lancelot Link segment, which I'm saving till the end. I've been waiting to do this one. For those that have never heard of the show, it's going to sound like a bad trip, but I swear it's real. Before we get started, obviously I cannot get into the meat of the podcast without thanking my Patreon subscribers. These are my biggest backers. I'm sure there's a lot of you out there that listen to every episode of the podcast, and I appreciate all of you, but nobody can top the ones that actually put their money where their mouth is to support me. And they are Lori, Mary Lou, Ashley, Kevin, Leo, Marguerite, Neglectoid, Crystal, Matt. Thank you for being the tops of the list. If all of my listeners are the honor roll, you are the high honor roll to get back to school coming up. But don't feel left out. You too can become a Patreon subscriber for $5 a month. Get you access to bonus podcast episodes, access to the remastered Without a Map live streams, and whatever other fun stuff that I seem to have pop into my head. Every now and then you'll notice something will go up on Patreon seemingly out of the blue, and it kind of is. If you're unsure about becoming a Patreon subscriber, I have a free tier over there. You can go and become a member there. It costs nothing. You get access to things like my Vegas journal, where I recount my time living in Las Vegas 25 years ago with me from today deciphering just what I was talking about back then. But if becoming a subscriber on Patreon isn't feasible, you're here now listening to the podcast, and that means so much. So just keep doing that and tell others. We'll get into more housekeeping stuff at the end of the show, but let's kick off episode 207 as we look at a short film diving into kind of the beginnings of the recycling movement of the 1970s. Make sure you split up your papers, plastics, and glass as we look at Recycling in Action, the educational short film, on episode 207 of the In My Footsteps podcast. Every couple of weeks, I take a pretty big trash bag filled with liter bottles, empty liter plastic bottles, to my local Stop and Shop to recycle them. I probably get an average of about $1.25 per load, but eventually that adds up. I typically wait until I have $10 or more of recycling money, and then I turn it in for cash, which I then typically spend on scratch tickets that I lose on, so I don't know. Recycling in general, it is the conversion of waste materials into something new. Plastic, glass, paper. A lot of the packaging for containers that you probably have in your home, in your kitchen now, are at least partially recycled materials. The idea of recycling has been around forever, but the mainstream movement as we know it today started in the late 1960s, early 70s, kind of around the beginning of Earth Day. The first Earth Day was April 22nd, 1970. It was after this day that the awareness of recycling and kind of the popularity, the craze of recycling really came to be. And that's also how this segment of the podcast came to be. We're going to review a short film called Recycling in Action. This is a 14-minute educational short film from 1973. I settled on this one for the podcast because I thought it would be fun to see how they explained recycling when it was first beginning. Because back then in the early 70s, recycling was probably something brand new in the minds of a lot of people. Sort of like on The Simpsons when Lisa tries to explain to Mr. Burns what recycling is.
Does your plant have a recycling program?
Recycling?
I love that. And he's got the dictionary in his mind that doesn't have recycling, but it has ragamuffin in it. I know, I keep saying it all comes back to The Simpsons for me. But let's harken back, won't you please, to 50 plus years ago as we look at recycling in action. As was tradition with a lot of educational short films in the 60s, 70s, it begins with some odd-sounding music with some ominous videos of pollution. There's a lot of classic 70s looking footage of garbage dumps and trash being moved around. Looking at it from the lens of myself now hurtling towards 50, it's gross thinking about being in the dump like that. And yet when I was a teenager, I lived not too far from the local dump and my friends and I would go into it. Sometimes we would find things in there to take home, including a stuffed Santa Claus that we put in a film that I shot with my camcorder in high school. But enough about my dump diving adventures. Let's get back to this film. After the music, after loads of seagulls are shown in the dump, we get the narrator explaining the problem with consumption, the problem with overloads of trash. The narrator talks about how recycling is the answer to a lot of these problems with the overloads of trash. It's here that we are introduced to a Santa Monica-based reclamation center, it's called. I'm figuring in the early 70s that was kind of the name that would be interspersed with recycling. And there's another place, the West Side Environmental Center. We get the guy that's kind of in charge of it explaining what recycling is and what they do.
Our Westside Environmental Center is operated entirely by volunteers with the help and cooperation of the people in the community. There are just all kinds of people working here. We have all age groups. We've had junior high.
We get the obligatory videos of people wheeling in shopping carts full of glass bottles, carrying piles of newspapers with their vintage 70s clothes. And all of these people are interviewed off screen, talking about why they're doing it, how they're helping the environment. It is interesting that as they're showing all the people bringing their recyclable goods to this place, that the owner who is talking on screen even admits that some people might see recycling as a fad. And I guess in the early 70s, maybe that's how they saw it, that it was cool at the time to help the environment, but some probably thought that it wouldn't stick. They explain about how the collected paper goes to a waste paper dealer, and that the talking is going on while on the screen there's a bulldozer just shoving piles of paper around. I do think that scenes like this with heavy machinery in there making noise was meant for the kids that would be watching this film in the 70s and 80s to keep them interested, because there's a lot of talking about recycling, and I could only imagine, I never saw this film when I was in school, but I could imagine being a kid, 10, 11, 12 years old, getting bored, watching people recycling and talking about it. So they figured we need to have loud noises and machines so that at least the boys would pay attention a little bit. They then explain about how usually it's self-service when it comes to these recycling places, but there are some things they need assistance for. Color coding the glass bottles, taking the little metal rings and the bottle tops off. They show a little girl dropping a bottle. I think it just bounces and doesn't break, but that would be something where they show the outtakes of this where she smashes the bottle and suddenly people are getting sliced open. It's like it goes from recycling in action to emergency room follies. After a few seconds of seeing little boys whipping the glass bottles in a dumpster to shatter them, we get a musical interlude of how glass bottles are made. One thing I found interesting was the aluminum cans, how they smash them. They show these people with these kind of tamping rods, flat bottoms with a big long handle, and they just have all these aluminum cans just lined up and the people are just smashing them flat. That would be something I would do. It's like if you're going to get kids to enjoy recycling, I think smashing the cans like that and then being able to whip glass bottles into a dumpster, that would probably get people invested, at least for a little while. A lot of this video, it's segments based on the different recyclable materials. We've already done paper, glass, aluminum cans. Then they get into wiring, like telephone cables. And again, I come back to the heavy machinery and loud noises to keep kids interested. Because at points when I was watching this, I was like, boy, this is not as exciting as I'd hoped it would be. And I was like, but I've already committed to doing it on the podcast. I had announced I was going to do it, so I couldn't change my mind and say, well, the video wasn't as exciting as others. So I changed my mind, so I stuck it out. Then we get into metal scrap recovery, which this really brought back memories for me of growing up. When my friends used to go to the dump, they had a metal pile, which they still have at the local dump. But when I was growing up, it was in an area far removed from the actual landfill area of the dump. So my friends and I could walk in there to this metal pile, and there would be full TVs intact in there. And our whole thing was finding these full intact TVs and busting the screens. Hey, give me a break. I was 16 years old. It's not like I was doing this last week. Although I do have video evidence of it, which that's incriminating. So they've talked about recycling different materials. Then we get into a woman that uses trash to make art.
And while I was here and had quiet times during the winter, I started putting things together with the scrap metal and trying to make pictures out of them. I use faucets and sprinkler heads and springs, parts of radiators, copper wire. So you can use just a little bit of everything and imagination, and you've got a picture.
They show a couple of her pieces of art. There's no information about if she was selling them, if she was hanging them in her house. I'm assuming she cleaned them off. I don't think she would want to have rusty springs and gears just leaking down her wall. And then we get some happy music playing as a little girl explains about donating her old clothes and toys to Goodwill. Then they show what must be Boy Scouts, Eagle Scouts, helping people with recycling, taking their bags of empty bottles. The video is meant to show people from all walks of life, all ages, pitching in together to help the environment and trying to show you that it's not that hard to recycle. It comes back around to showing the Boy Scouts or Cub Scouts or whatever they are, smashing the glass bottles and stomping on the cans, which, again, that's a way to make it appealing to little boys. You get to break bottles and stomp on things. Then we get to a neat thing where it's these high school students that are using scrap plastic that they're shredding and melting down, and they're doing it in school. This is something I don't remember any schools near me having the ability to do.
We take these bottles from our school and we use our equipment here. We grind it up and it comes out like a flakes. And then we take it to a company and they put it in this big machine and they melt it down and they make big long strands of plastic and they chop it up into these little pellets. And what we do is we trade them our scrap material and they give us back pelletized material.
What the kids are doing with their class project is they're making plastic bags that are used in trash cans. I'm sure that they show all the kids and they've got goggles on, but I don't know if breathing in shredded up plastic is really good. That was the first thing I thought of. You're putting the plastic in there. You're telling me there's no particles that are in the air getting in your lungs. So maybe that's why I never saw anything like this growing up. They realized you probably got sick from it. They also grind up and shred styrofoam containers, which again, you're telling me there's no particles that get in the air, so you're breathing in plastic dust and styrofoam dust. That's good for your lungs. They make bean bags and thumbtacks out of the recycled material. The kids, they talk about what plastic is, but then it comes back to the awareness of how it affects the environment, all the waste. It had to be different back then, 50 years ago, where today, when someone mentions recycling, you kind of have an idea of what it is. But back then, when it was more or less just starting off, becoming a national thing, I think you had to really start at square one, explaining to people what everything is, what the materials are, and why they need to be recycled. We get near the end, there's a company called Hall. I think that's what they are. They drive around in one of those classic VW vans, and they pick up your recycling. It's like today's trash companies, but they were doing it on their own.
Basically, what Hall is all about is what we operate a home pickup service of recyclables in which we travel around the neighborhoods and pick up people's recyclables that cannot get to the recycling centers. It's inconvenient. And what we do is we just ask them to separate their glass from their cans, rinse things out, and stack their newspapers inside, and we pick up twice a month. And we charge $3 for this service.
It shows how some of these people, they were thinking already about how recycling could be a business or at least a side hustle back then. And we wrap up with some peaceful guitar music as the voices from the past of this video just give an overview about why we need to recycle and the dangers of if we don't. It's all pretty common sense stuff. And that wraps up Recycling in Action. 14 minutes of classic early 70s looking film. We get some credits. It's an Amitai film, so they're the people that made it. The music that you've heard that I've played, it's by David Bloomberg. And there's a whole bunch of people and locations thanked at the end of the film. It's obviously from California. I said that was Santa Monica was one of the recycling centers. And it's by Filmfare Communications. So I'll have a link to that video in the podcast notes if you want to go and watch Recycling in Action from 1973. Like I said, it's not as exciting or funny or foolish as some of the videos that I've shared before. I realized it about halfway through and I was like, well, it's too late for that. We're going to deal with it. So I hope that inspired you to go recycling. This week in history, we are going back 31 years to August 11th, 1994, and the beginning of the Major League Baseball Players Association strike. Oh, I remember this all too well. The 94 MLB Players strike, it's one of the most devastating and controversial events in the history of baseball. It led to the cancellation of the remainder of the 94 season, including all postseason and World Series, which was the first time that the World Series had been canceled since 1903. The seeds of this strike were planted years earlier. In the late 80s, early 90s, Major League Baseball owners were accused of colluding to suppress players' salaries. The primary point of contention in 94 was the owners proposing a salary cap in baseball, putting a limit on how much money players could make, teams could spend. The players, led by MLBPA Executive Director Donald Fear, firmly opposed the proposal, viewing it as an infringement on free agency and individual earning power. After months of failed negotiations, the players went on strike with no resolution in sight. So at the time of the strike in baseball, the best record was held by the Montreal Expos. They were 74-40 and poised for what could have been the franchise's first ever World Series run. Tony Gwynn of the San Diego Padres was hovering around a .400 batting average, which was a feat that had not been achieved since Ted Williams in 1941 with the Boston Red Sox. Ken Griffey Jr. of the Seattle Mariners and Matt Williams of the San Francisco Giants were on pace to challenge Roger Maris's single-season home run record of 61. And Cal Ripken Jr. of the Baltimore Orioles was approaching Lou Gehrig's consecutive games played record. It was on September 12th of 1994 that acting MLB Commissioner Bud Selig officially announced the cancellation of the World Series. This was a major low point for baseball. Not only was it a championship lost, but also an entire chapter of baseball lore. There was no MVPs, no Cy Young Award winners, no playoff heroes. After this, public opinion turned sour against both owners and players. For many fans, the strike represented a betrayal, with millionaires and billionaires squabbling over profits while the game suffered. The strike carried on into spring training of 1995, which featured minor leaguers and replacement-level talent wearing major league uniforms, which drew ridicule and protest. The MLBPA filed an unfair labor practices complaint with the National Labor Relations Board, which ruled in the players' favor. After 232 days, the longest strike in baseball history ended on April 2nd, 1995. The 95 season was shortened to 144 games instead of the standard 162, but the damage to the league's credibility and fan trust lingered for years. Possibly the greatest victim of the strike was the Montreal Expos. That team was a powerhouse. It had Larry Walker, Pedro Martinez, Moises Alou, Marquise Grissom. They were poised to make a serious postseason run. After the strike, ownership dismantled the team due to financial losses, and they never recovered. The team eventually relocated to Washington, D.C. in 2005 and became the Washington Nationals. The strike was a landmark moment in labor relations in professional sports, as it solidified the MLB Players Association's strength as one of the most powerful unions in the United States. Honestly, it wasn't until the home run race of 1998 between Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa that really reignited interest in baseball. And that's kind of an interesting monkey's paw, where MLB got their viewership back, but the steroid investigations that came after that kind of cast a light they didn't want on the sport. While baseball eventually recovered, the lost season remains a scar for the sport's legacy, with fans of the 1994 Expos, Tony Gwynn's near .400 batting average campaign, and for just baseball historians alike. It represents one of the greatest what-ifs in Major League Baseball. And that Major League Baseball Players Association strike occurred 31 years ago this week in history. Oh, don't worry. The brand new time capsule is not going on strike. We got everything we wanted. For this time capsule, we are staying on the same day, August 11th, 1994. What was going on in the world of pop culture as baseball went on strike? Well, let's find out. The number one song was Stay, I Missed You by Lisa Loeb and 9 Stories. This song was off of the soundtrack for the movie Reality Bites. It's kind of a pop rock folk mix. Lisa Loeb had a very unique look, kind of a girl next door look with the long hair and glasses. It's an interesting story because Lisa Loeb, she was the first one to have a number one song on the Billboard Hot 100 before having a major recording contract. The song stayed at number one for 3 weeks, and eventually the single sold almost 1 million copies. The number one movie was Clear and Present Danger, which I somehow have written in my notes as clear and pleasant danger, which, what the hell? But anyway, whether you were going to see clear and present danger or pleasant danger, you could get into the theater with a ticket costing $4.08. This is a thriller starring Harrison Ford, James Earl Jones, and Willem Dafoe. The movie was a massive hit, making $216 million on a budget of $62 million. It is one of the movies in a series featuring character Jack Ryan, played by Harrison Ford. And this film is a sequel to The Hunt for Red October and Patriot Games. The number one TV show was Home Improvement. This is the sitcom starring Tim Allen as Tim the Toolman Taylor, with his own TV show and the hijinks of his family. This show was a quintessential 90s show, literally on the air throughout the 90s, from 91 to 99 for 8 seasons. And for those fans of Home Improvement, it is joining the fashionable trend of getting a reboot. It's going to be on Hulu in November 2025. So there you go. Home Improvement is coming back for all of you to watch, as long as you get the streaming platform. And if you were around back then, August 11th, 1994, Major League Baseball has gone on strike. You're feeling sad. How will you amuse yourself? Well, I've got something for you. Thanks to Circuit City and the Boston Globe, they have a contest where you could win tickets to go see Aerosmith on their Get a Grip album tour. You can enter at your nearest Circuit City to go see them at Great Woods. Well, there's 2 things that don't exist anymore. Well, I mean, Great Woods is there. It's the Xfinity Center, but whatever. But even if you don't get the tickets, there are lots of CDs on sale at Circuit City. You could get Ace of Base, The Sign, Da Brat, Functified, Rolling Stones, Voodoo Lounge, or Gin Blossom's New Miserable Experience, all for $9.88. So you can't lose anyway. And that'll wrap up another time capsule, another This Week in History. Just because a movie is nominated for an Academy Award does not make it good, which is amazing to think. So let's dive into a brand new top 5 featuring the worst movies ever that actually were nominated for an Academy Award. When you hear that a movie is Oscar nominated, your mind immediately goes to, oh man, that's like the cream of the crop when it comes to the film industry. Well, you would be sadly mistaken if you thought that every film nominated for an Academy Award was good, and I've got the proof here with the brand new top 5. We're going to look at the top 5 worst movies ever that were nominated for Academy Awards. It goes to show you that even the highest class of awards can be crashed by less than stellar films. All of these films, I put in here what they were nominated for, so you'll get an idea. I will tell you, none of them were nominated for Best Picture, so don't worry. Most of the awards these films are nominated for are kind of the lower level Academy Awards, I guess. I did a lot of research and found a lot of bad movies here that are Academy Award nominated. As with most of these top 5s, they're in no particular order. I've got some honorable mentions that I will go through kind of quickly to give you a taste of what the real top 5 will be. Now, obviously, just because I say these are the worst films that are Oscar nominated, there's probably going to be a few that you are going to say, wait, I like that movie. What's wrong with you? And that's fine. There are plenty of movies that I like that were not Oscar nominated at all. I mean, I would have thought Friday the 13th Part 3 would have gotten nominated for an Academy Award for Best 3D Effects, but what do I know? So let us start off the top 5 with the honorable mentions for worst movies that were Academy Award nominated. Honorable mentions include Jonathan Livingston's Seagull, which is a film from 1973 that actually was nominated for 2 Academy Awards: Best Cinematography and Best Film Editing. It is also 8% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. Another honorable mention is Thank God It's Friday. This film is from 1978. It was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Original Song, which was Last Dance by Donna Summer. And it did win the Academy Award. It's also 36% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. Another honorable mention is Endless Love. This movie is from 1981. It was also nominated for Best Original Song, which was entitled Endless Love by Lionel Richie and Diana Ross. It did not win the award. And the movie is 26% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. Another honorable mention is The Affair of the Necklace. This film is from 2001. It was nominated for Best Costume Design and is 15% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. And the last honorable mention is The Sting 2. This movie is from 1983, sequel to the successful film The Sting. It was nominated for Best Musical Score, which it did not win, and it is 10% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. So those are the honorable mentions. Are any of those films in your rotation of your favorites ever? Well, get ready. Now we're getting into the real dregs of Academy Award nominations. These, you're going to be shocked. There's one of these that you will not believe is Academy Award nominated. Okay, here we go. Top 5 worst movies that were Oscar nominated. We're going to start with number 1, Norbit. Yes, you heard that right. The Eddie Murphy film from 2007 where he plays himself and his bullying, overweight wife. That is Oscar nominated for Best Makeup. When you step back and think about it, think about the film and the makeup and Eddie Murphy playing multiple characters, it does make sense. The film is 9% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. It is considered one of the worst films Eddie Murphy ever made. This was during his period where seemingly everything he did not succeed, which after growing up in the 80s and early 90s, it was hard to imagine Eddie Murphy could make movies that weren't immediately $200-300 million blockbusters. If you're basing it just on Rotten Tomatoes, this film is a fail. If you're basing it on box office returns, it's actually a success. The movie made $159 million on a budget of $60 million. I have seen this movie before. I saw it once, which is why I have not seen it twice. Your opinion may vary. I can see where the makeup effects deserved an Oscar nomination, but the rest of the film, not so much. Number 2 is Meteor. This film is from 1979. It stars Sean Connery and was nominated for Best Score. It is about the United States and the Soviet Union putting their differences aside to try to destroy a meteor that's hurtling towards Earth. It is a whopping 5% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. Yes, Sean Connery, Henry Fonda, Natalie Wood. The movie did not win the Academy Award for Best Score. It lost to Apocalypse Now, which, by the way, is 90% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. Was nominated for 8 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, and won 2 of them. The film is seen as boring with too much dialogue and not enough action. It was a major bomb at the box office, making just over $12 million on a budget of $16 million. It just goes to show you, even Sean Connery didn't have every movie as a hit. Number 3 is Heart Beeps. This is a 1981 comedy starring Andy Kaufman. It was nominated for Best Makeup. It did not win the award. The movie is about robots that fall in love. It is 0% on Rotten Tomatoes. The film was also nominated for 6 Stinker Awards, which I've never even heard of. I don't know, are those as prestigious as the Oscars? The movie is Andy Kaufman at his weird best. If you liked his comedy, you might enjoy this movie. If you didn't like him beyond Taxi, then you're probably not going to like Heart Beeps. But hey, don't let that 0% fresh sway you and not watch Heart Beeps. Number 4 is The Swarm. This film was nominated for Best Costume Design. It's a sci-fi, horror, nature attacks movie. The movie is from 1978, and it stars Michael Caine as people try to fight back against killer bees that have deadly venom, and they don't know why they're attacking people. So nominated for Best Costume Design, not Best Effects, which, I don't know. The movie is 9% fresh, which I would say is Michael Caine's worst-rated movie ever, but he was also in Jaws the Revenge, which is 2% fresh. Which makes sense because after I saw Jaws 4, I gave 2 middle fingers, so that's the rating for it. The Swarm was a bomb, making $7.5 million on a budget of just under $12 million. I will say this is a movie that is listed on a lot of so bad it's good lists, so take that as you will. And finally, number 5 on the list of worst movies that were Oscar nominated is the one that I can't believe. And that is Mannequin. Ugh. I know that's going to disappoint my 3 sisters as we grew up watching that 1987 terrible quote-unquote comedy. They all loved it. It's a movie starring Kim Cattrall as a mannequin that comes to life. The movie is 20% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. It was nominated for Best Song, which is Nothing's Gonna Stop Us Now by Starship. Again, what? How is that nominated for Best Original Song? The song's not bad, but you're telling me there aren't 5 other better songs in a movie in 1987? Can you tell I'm partial against this film? How many times I wanted to watch something else, but my sisters were like, we need to watch Mannequin again. The most apt description of Mannequin that I ever saw was the Family Guy cutaway where Peter Griffin is watching the videotape and you think it's like the movie The Ring, but it ends up being Mannequin and it just shows him all twisted on the floor while Nothing's Gonna Stop Us Now plays. The movie was a hit, making over $42 million on a budget of $8 million, but 10-year-old me and up to now me cannot understand why people like this movie or why it was Oscar nominated. But if my sisters had their own podcast, they would have this on the best movies that were Oscar nominated. We end the top 5, and we go from worst movies that were Oscar nominated to one of the weirdest, trippiest, short-lived shows, and a segment that I'm very excited to talk about. So get ready to learn about all things Lancelot Link, Secret Chimp, right now. Oh, every now and then there's a segment on the podcast that's one of those that I've been waiting so long to talk about that I can't wait. These are the types of segments where I have to rein myself in because I want it to be organized. I don't want it to just be me rambling about things that I enjoy that you may not know about. This will be filled with lots of laughter. Basically, every time I say the name of the show, I will laugh. Lancelot Link's Secret Chimp is a real show that came out in 1970. It is not some fever dream that I am inventing from my writer's mind. But if this show is from 1970, which was 7 years before I was born, why do I have such an affinity for it, and why does it speak to my childhood so much? A lot of it is luck. I started watching Nick at Night when it came out in the mid-1980s. I became very familiar with a lot of TV shows from the 50s and 60s, like Car 54, Where Are You?, The Donna Reed Show, Mr. Ed, My Three Sons, Laugh-In. And it was during this time, probably in the late 80s, I had to be 11 years old, maybe, that a TV show came on that spoke to me as a child. It's a show where every actor in it was a chimp. There were no humans. And these chimps would talk. They were involved in intricate plots. So talking chimps that did funny things, that really spoke to me. The name of the show was Lancelot Link, Secret Chimp. I can't keep saying that name without giving you some of the intro. We've got to start with the intro song.
Lancelot Link, Secret Chimp.
Chester, he has no fear. He's the agent to call when trouble is near. Lance Link, you gotta come through. Everybody at 8 is counting on you.
I played that song and the video that goes along with it for my sister Ashley the other day, and she was just cracking up laughing. It's a show that is very much a sign of its times in the early 1970s, but it's also one of those, how in the world did this show ever get made type of shows. Lancelot Link's Secret Chimp would be a show that you would probably find on my Blink and You'll Miss It retro segments if I had not watched it myself as a kid. The show was on Saturday mornings when it first came out. It combined Cold War spy spoofing like James Bond with a cast, like I said, it was entirely trained chimpanzees. The show combined things like Get Smart, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., The Monkees, and like I said, James Bond, to create one of the weirdest, trippiest shows you'll ever find. You could do animated shows where all of the characters are chimps and they do the same exact stuff they do on Lancelot Link, and it wouldn't make the same impact, as actual chimps doing it. The show itself premiered on ABC on September 12, 1970. And when I say blink and you'll miss it, the last episode of the show was January 2nd, 1971. Barely 4 months it was on the air in original content. It was a total of 17 episodes, 34 segments, because usually the plots of the show would be the beginning and end, and then in the middle they broke it up with these little short skits called Chimpies, which we'll get into. The idea for this insanity of a TV show came from Stan Burns and Mike Marmer. They were comedy writers who had worked on the show Get Smart. The plot of the show centers around the titular character, Lancelot Link. He's an undercover secret agent chimp working for the company Ape Agency to Prevent Evil, and his nemesis is called Chump, Criminal Headquarters for Underworld Master Plan. Obviously, they are the evil organization bent on world destruction. The entire Lancelot Link show is set up as kind of the spy versus spy, where the good spies try to thwart the evil spies. The charm and the absurdity of Lancelot Link's Secret Chimp came from the dedication to the gimmick of real chimps dressed in real clothes, lip-syncing to human dialogue. The idea was that the chimps were trained to do things on the show. Walking upright was a challenge, opening doors, opening drawers, picking up a telephone. And when they would talk, or at least open their mouths, the voice actors would have to mimic the mouth movements. So if you had one of the chimps open their mouth for a long time, the voice actor would have to make that word extend to match it. So who were the characters on the show? Lancelot Link was voiced by a man named Dayton Allen. He sounds very much like Humphrey Bogart, who was an actor in the 30s, 40s, 50s, for those of you that don't know film history.
What a dumb mask. One eye hole and one ear hole. I got a good mind to return this to the store and get my money back.
Never mind. Put your skis on.
He typically wore a trench coat. He had a bunch of one-liners. He would get dressed up in different costumes to thwart the villains. A fun little note about Lancelot Link. The chimp that played him was named Tonga. And all of the other chimps on the show, they got to train to actually move their mouths like they were talking. Lancelot Link, or Tonga, he would not speak, so they had to give him gum to chew. So if you watch the show, and I really recommend you watch at least one episode, in all of them, that's where Lancelot Link doesn't talk. You can see he's chewing gum. That's how it was like Mr. Ed the horse, putting peanut butter under his gums to get his mouth to move. Lancelot Link's partner and love interest is named Mata Hari.
Man, you got him on backwards.
There's a good reason why I got him on this way.
What reason?
Well, In case I'm following anyone, they'll really think they're following me.
Huh?
Never mind.
It is said that this chimp, who was really named Debbie, was the smartest of all the chimps on the show. My inside info that I'm going to sprinkle in here, when I was binge watching some of the Lancelot Link episodes for the show, what a hard job. Anyway, when I was binge watching Lancelot Link, I found a short documentary, probably like 20-ish minutes long, with Stan Burns and Mike Marmer, I believe from the late 1990s, where they talked about behind-the-scenes stuff with the show. There's one story in particular that I'm going to share near the end because I think the clip will do more justice to it. But they're the ones in the documentary that talk about training the chimps and how basic things like walking upright required a lot of effort. That and getting them to wear clothes and not rip them off. Other main characters on the show was Commander Darwin, who was the boss of Ape. The leader of Chimp was Baron Von Butcher. There was the Duchess and Dragon Lady and the henchman Credo. All of them had their own voices, their own personalities. So you're looking at shows that could have more than a dozen trained chimps in them. They had chimps driving cars, skiing, having to drink water and eat food. But as a kid in the late 80s, when I saw this, it was one of the funniest things, but also amazing to me. It really spoke to that age group. I mentioned a few minutes ago that there were 2 segments of each episode of Lancelot Link, and in the middle there was a little break. Sometimes it was things called chimpies, which could be things like dancing or monkey magicians. They had an Ed Sullivan imitator that was Ed Simeon.
I'm your host, Ed Simeon, and tonight we have a really big show for you.
The highlight of the Chimpies breaks was the Evolution Revolution band, which is all chimps, obviously. It was like the house band, and they would break in and there'd be music. All the chimps, it was led by Lancelot Link. He played guitar. They had a chimp playing drums, one playing keyboard.
Lancelot Link and the Evolution Revolution!
These little music videos were inspired by the Monkees or the Archies, and were actually some catchy tunes. So some of these tracks from the show were actually released as a real album under the name Lancelot Link and the Evolution Revolution. I just did a quick deep dive trying to find any of these albums for sale. You can find a few, but they're all over $100 because they're rare. In a funny little note, in that documentary that I've been referencing, at the end, Stan Burns and Mike Marmer, they are each gifted a copy of what I think is a vinyl album, but it's a hard rock or punk band covering one of the Evolution Revolution songs. And it's funny, they play a clip of the song, but you can see that these guys are not that interested in getting this vinyl album. I'm assuming it went like right in their attic. The songs by the Evolution Revolution band were written by Steve Hoffman and Bob Eminger, with Eminger doing a lot of low-budget sci-fi scores in the later 70s, early 80s. When you watch one of these episodes, you've got to keep in mind that imagine trying to train chimps to do the things that they're doing in this show. Like I said, there's episodes where Lancelot Link is supposed to be driving a car, or he's carrying a tray with food on it, or even the easiest thing like wearing clothes, because it was said in the documentary that they would just rip their clothes off. Or there'd be times where, just imagine, you get a lot of male chimps and female chimps in the same area at the same time. What do you think they were doing? Yeah, so in the documentary, they talked about a lot of sex between the chimps. Not graphic or anything, but I couldn't think of a better way to say it. Anyway, to cut that off at the pass, or at least they thought they did, they castrated all the male chimps. Which, if you don't know what that is, look it up on your own. It's like getting your dog fixed. The problem was it did not fix the problem. The chimps didn't care. Despite all of these issues, bribing the chimps to actually do the movements, when you watch the show, it comes off like a live-action cartoon. It was just adult enough that I would think that older people could watch, but the mix of animal antics, slapstick comedy, the music, it was perfect for Saturday mornings. Obviously, the show must have had mixed reviews because it only lasted 17 episodes. Kids loved it. Parents and critics saw it as silly or overly gimmicky. There was loads of merchandise. I mentioned the album. There was lunch boxes. There's comic books. They have the full show on DVD. You can watch the show on Amazon Prime, but you can also watch all the episodes on YouTube. So we're talking almost 15, 20 years after the show went off the air is when I saw it. And I can't be the only one from my age group that saw Lancelot Link and immediately thought, oh my God, this show is great. Every time I say the name or hear the theme song or see an episode, it makes me think of me and my sister Kate watching the show and just laughing at monkeys doing things. So if you're wondering a reason why Lancelot Link perhaps didn't last more than one season, there's a story from that documentary that I mentioned earlier with creators Stan Burns and Mike Marmer. It's about the chimp that played Lancelot Link, real name Tonga. So for the show, they're all animals, so they had to be checked out by the vet. And I guess Tonga the chimp was not a big fan of the vet probing him and doing all this stuff, and he was pretty upset. The creators of the show kind of told the vet he's not going to forget this, just so you know. I don't know if that was a threat or to make the vet aware to steer clear of Tonga. At a later date, the vet was back. Tonga the chimp saw him and went right after him and knocked him down and started biting him on the back. While this was going on, the ABC network execs had shown up to the set. So they're getting out of their car and they look up and there's this chimp attacking the vet. And when I heard that story, all I could think of was them seeing this attack going on and then hearing the Lancelot Link music playing. It's like insanity. I'm not saying that's why the show didn't last longer, but if you were paying money producing this show and the star of the show was like killing someone else there when you showed up, what would you do? The vet was all right. I shouldn't say killing him. He did bite a chunk out of his back, though. That's the stuff that is not on the DVD extras if you buy the box set. There you go. Lancelot Link's Secret Chimp with some music and clips sprinkled in. If you have never heard of or seen this show, go watch at least one episode. Maybe you'll think it's dumb and you'll never watch it again. Maybe you'll binge all 17 episodes. Maybe you and your band will cover the songs that the Evolution Revolution band did. So thank you for taking that trip down memory lane with me. Oh man, it was definitely worth it.
So justice has no fear. He's the agent to call when trouble is near. Lance Link, what you gonna do?
But until next week, that wraps up episode 207 of the In My Footsteps podcast. No chimps were harmed in the making of this podcast. Thank you all for tuning in for your weekly dose of Gen X nostalgia. Thank you again to my Patreon subscribers. You can become a member for $5 a month on Patreon. You can also buy me a coffee. Links to both of those are in the description of the podcast for those of you who want to support me as a content creator, author, burgeoning actor, director, whatever else I can throw in there. If money is not feasible, donating to help a content creator, sharing what I do means everything. It literally takes 2 seconds to hit copy and paste with a link in your social media. Next week, the train keeps on rolling with episode 208. We're going to look back at just what in the world was an amphicar. Spoiler, it's half car, half boat. We're going to go way, way back in the day and look at the very first sports video games. None of these are as good as Madden. We will groove to the top 5 best instrumental songs ever. And we'll look back at the legendary career of Boston Celtics player Larry Bird on the anniversary of his retirement. That is a loaded show to continue the dog days of summer, so tune in next week for episode 208. You can find me all over social media. I have a Facebook fan page for the podcast. I'm on Threads, Instagram, Blue Sky. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. I've got hundreds and hundreds of videos, a lot of podcast segments, full podcast episodes. Now remember, it's just audio. There are no video podcasts yet. It's something I've thought about. It's just so much work. Doing this show as audio is enough work where I can edit out any mistakes or whatever. I tried doing the video podcast thing the end of last year with the webcam weekly wrap-up. I didn't even do 20 of them, and the workload was just so much. It's another one of those things, there's only so much time in the day, so these are still audio podcasts for now. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, I hope it's the best possible day, week. Remember to get out there and enjoy the weather the best you can. I mean, if it's 110 and humid, then don't. Stay in the AC. But all I know is before you know it, it's going to be November, December. It'll be in the 30s and 40s. And I know I'll be shocked by that first cold day. Like it doesn't happen every year for the 40 plus years I've been alive. But until next time, folks, remember, in this life, don't walk in anyone else's footsteps. Create your own path and enjoy every moment you can on this journey we call life, because you never know what tomorrow brings. Thank you all again for tuning in. This has been the In My Footsteps podcast. I am Christopher Setterlund, but you already knew that. And I'll talk to you all again soon.